Good morning and welcome to Legacy Planning with local attorney Steve Waltar. Legacy Planning is committed to helping you provide personalized and compassionate estate planning to help you organize and transfer your estate smoothly with minimal taxes, costs, and hassles. Steve has the mind of an attorney and the heart of a pastor, and he'd love to take your call this morning to answer your estate planning questions. The lines are open at 1-800-955-8200. That's 800-955-8200. Now, here's your host of Legacy Planning, Steve Waltar.
Good morning, Seattle. Yes, live and local, this is Steve Waltar with Legacy Planning. And I usually start off with kind of a little what happened in my world this week. And, I'm an attorney, of course, and I'd love to have you call. This is free time for you, free advice over the radio. So I got called for jury duty, and last time that happened, oh my gosh, years ago, I went to downtown to King County, and if you don't serve on either of the two first consecutive days, you're kind of done with your duty. Well, this was in Redmond, and they said your first day of duty was Tuesday, and so I blocked off, and I'd given seminars, a couple weeks ago, so I have a lot of appointments, a lot of people wanted to see me. So I wasn't exactly thrilled to be called for jury duty. It's important. I get that. I see that. But usually when I've been called as an attorney, they don't want me to serve. So I blocked off 2 days. And as it turns out, I wrote down, once I learned that they might want me actually Thursday and Friday, I'm like, I've got 11 appointments. I've got, my staff. It would have been kind of a hardship. So 3 different times I wrote down little letters, and the judges, they always poo-pooed the deal. So Wednesday, I was juror number 1, and they said, okay, this is going to be a DUI case, and we want to ask a bunch of general questions before we impanel the jury. And so the prosecutor was the first to go, and she, first, raise your hand if anyone here has been if you've served on jury duty in the past, and if you're in law enforcement, and anyway, I raised my hand on that one. I'm looking to raise my hand as much as I can because I'm a former prosecutor, and so she wanted to know about this whole deal, and how long ago was that, and what kind of things did you do? So then they raised their hand. Is there anyone that thinks you wouldn't be able to just sit back and impartially listen and judge on this case? And I raised my hand, and again, Mr. Waltar, juror number 1, and they said, well, why do you think you could not be impartial? I said, well, as a former prosecutor, I believe that almost everyone that makes it to trial for a DUI is guilty. Well, that kind of just, I think that the prosecutor was secretly going, yes, I got someone on my side. But, by the time that she finished all of her questions and it rolled up to the defense attorney, he kind of, his first question was to Mr. Walter, now, I thought you said this. Is that really the case? And I said, well, yeah, most things plead out if there's any, I didn't want to taint the whole jury pool, but as a former prosecutor, it's kind of rare that it's really going to make it all the way to trial. And this case was going to involve, oh my gosh, not only drinking, but, crazy erratic driving and gambling. And one of my best friends lost his marriage due to all these things. So anyway, I was bumped out of there. And then they still wouldn't let me off duty on Friday. So I had to cancel 5 appointments and a meeting with the top surgeon from Swedish, who's going to give a client appreciation seminar, talk about heart and valve, transplants. And anyway, that was a hassle, but it's my civic duty. I served it. I got through that whole thing. A couple of things. It was fun in the studio this morning, actually, signing a couple of books. What I'd like to do is the first person that calls in today and has an estate planning question and is brave enough to go on the radio with us, I'm going to actually get I'll have my producer go ahead and get your phone number, your address, things like that. And we'll call back, and my staff will mail you. We will send you free of charge my second book, which is called Legacy Estate Planning. And Legacy Estate Planning is really an awful lot about why I've got this show. I've done wills and trusts and done estate planning for more than 20 years now. I thought I did great wills and trusts when I first practiced. And to be honest, most attorneys are kind of arrogant. They think they've got great forms. But I've been doing this long enough that I see when the plans did not work. And sometimes it's that I didn't do the greatest wills and trusts. life came along and I didn't build a plan that if a spouse died and there was a remarriage, I didn't build for that. Now I like to put in required prenup provisions. My parents have been married 54 plus years, and they've seen what happens when one spouse dies, and often we men need help. We need to remarry, and that just implodes the estate plans. So, I do lots of ways to help avoid probate, to avoid conflict, to, salvage homes, to do all sorts of things. A lot of times powers of attorney don't work because the law changes. So anyway, I now give a free review for my clients every 3 years. So estate planning, that's what I do. I would love to have you come, and meet with me at my office. I give free initial consultations. Today is just an opportunity to call in and ask a question and talk about estate planning. So the number to call here is 1-800-955-8200. That is 1-800-955-8200. The other thing is you can actually email a question to radio@waltar.com. I better spell Waltar, so it's WALTAR. So just radio@waltar.com, and then we'll see it on the screen here, and then we can see the question, and you don't even have to be on the phone. I'll just address that. But the other part of why I've launched this show and what is legacy estate planning is to make sure that what if your attorney, what if I even do all the best documents? Your powers of attorney are awesome. Your healthcare powers, your HIPAA, your will, your trust, whatever. I draft the best plan in the world for you, but your insurance person doesn't know you have a will. And they list the beneficiaries, your children, and then there's no creditor protection for your children. Or your financial planner does a terrible job. I've met with people for that review 3 years later, and they've lost $1 million because they were playing the stock market on their own. Well, how can the subtrust and the benefit for the next generation work? So that's a real big problem. It does not work all that well. And one of the things that I realize is that my clients, sometimes they got that big IRA, and we could talk about that some days. I've had guests that have been financial advisors. Last week, I had an advisor with me as a guest who was a mortgage specialist. And I got some interest over the radio and through the contacts. And I'm meeting with some people to talk about the estate planning portion. But one of the primary questions someone has is, do I and should I get a reverse mortgage? And that came up a little bit last week, and today we're fortunate to have as a guest Tom Ritter, who he understands and does reverse mortgages. It's not all that he does, but actually he's been doing mortgages for more than 8 years now, and he was actually brought in to work with Axia. I think it's called Axia Home Loans. I can look at my material here and see that. I'm sure he'll correct me if I'm wrong. He was brought in to head up their reverse mortgage division. And I like Tom. I've met him a number of times. We've had meals together. We had breakfast together again today at Jimmy's on First. Boy, that place is getting to produce some pretty good food for me. Maybe I'll get a meal out of that or something. Right across from Safeco Field there. It's a nice spot. So Tom has really built his practice to meet the needs of seniors. Now, he also helps young families and stuff like that. But as we were talking today, when he got into reverse mortgages, he realized, look, it's really important when people have this big asset, he better understand their advisors and how they handle money and what about housing and placement and all. So he surrounded himself with this team of really not only attorneys but advisors so that he can be in the best position to help his clients. So I would say he's a legacy planner in the mortgage realm, and that fits so well with me and my format and my values. And Tom's a Christian man, and he's got a bunch of children. And anyway, Tom, thank you so much for coming in today.
Thanks, Steve. It's great to be here, and I really appreciate the opportunity to share some of my experience with you and with your listeners.
I'd love to hear about that. What have I missed on your background? Why don't you tell the listeners just a little bit about why you do what you do, a little bit more, about your life?
Yeah, okay. Well, I was asked to be a part of Axia Home Loans about 9 years ago, and the CEO called me and asked me to start their reverse mortgage division. And I came aboard from outside the industry, which was really his idea. He wanted somebody from outside the industry that was really focused on providing the client with solutions to their needs. So that is really the perspective that I came into the industry with. And today I help all types of individuals with residential mortgage. And I really focus on helping people buy homes and refinance. But a portion of my business is still reverse mortgage. The first 6 years with the company, I ran the division. I really mentored quite a few loan originators on how to do reverse mortgage. And as you had mentioned, Steve, I surrounded myself with as many experts that provide services to seniors so that, one, I could understand what the senior needs, but two, provide them with solutions that were holistic, that it's not just a transaction. It is really understanding what my client needs, short-term and long-term. And
I got to stop you on that. It's not just a transaction because, people will call me and say, hey, why should I pay an attorney? I can go down to Office, Max and buy a form. I can go online. I've actually seen wills that completely miss the point. A will is a creature that eventually guides people to court and probate. And in Washington, in fact, I signed one this last week. This is a couple. They have no children. They need a community property agreement that avoids court more than they need a will. So, I like to have a relationship with people. And they're paying for my advice, not my forms. They're paying for that counsel. So tell me how you view that. It's not just a transaction, but it meets the whole needs. What was that kind of?
Well, the first questions I always ask any client is, what do you want to accomplish, right? And typically there's a surface.
Not what's the rate, not what, tell me more.
Right? Yeah. And it's really digging into my client's lifestyle, their needs, what's important to them, what's important to their family. And by gathering this information and getting some background, I can also bring other resources to that client. You, for example.
Moi?
Yes, you. Exactly. It's critical to ask the big questions in order to provide a sound, full solution. And over the years, I have really focused much of my time getting to know many professionals that serve my ideal client so that I can understand their goals and objectives, and if I have the right solution, great. But if I don't, I can build a team for them for that solution, and that's critical to really providing what I do, and that's really my mission, is helping people accomplish what their goals are.
That is great, and there's such a similarity in how we approach things. And I see two main topics that I wanted to cover with you. And one, I'm just kind of highlighting, when you say you got to ask the questions and what's important to them. When I'm meeting with a couple or an individual, that's the first part of the meeting, maybe the first 15, 20 minutes. Tell me what's important to you. Why are you here? What's going on? What do you value? If they want me to review their will, their trust, their power of attorney, I can't start with that. I need to ask them what's important. I need to figure out what's important to them. And then I can tell them whether they're meeting that need, or we can build a plan to deal with that. It sounds like that's your approach. It's
Absolutely.
Never, Yep. And then the second thing is, you probably have had some good and bad experiences working with advisors. So I'm sure that's something we'll want to tackle. So that's the second thing. And the third thing I'm thinking about is, you've got some good stories and you brought your own guest. So I think we're going to take a break here and we'll come back. But after the break, we're going to talk about some stories about reverse mortgages and who needs to do, if one of your largest assets is the home or your parents' home, when do you want to refi? When should you consider reverse mortgage? We'll talk about that after the break.
Legacy Planning with Steve Waltar. Has it been over 5 years since you've reviewed your estate plan? Well, the laws keep changing. You'll definitely want to keep listening. The lines are open at 800-955-8200. That's 800-955-8200. Legacy Planning. Live and local. This is Legacy Planning with Steve Waltar. Wondering if you really have complete, up-to-date estate plans? Call Steve right now at 800-955-8200. That's 800-955-8200.
That's right. Live and local, local and live. The Steve Waltar sitting downtown here in Seattle. On the news this week was the whole 405 mess and all that. I live over in the east side, and I think if they could fix that mess, that would be an accomplishment. And it's an accomplishment to plan your estate properly, and often one of the largest assets that people have is the family home. So today I have with me a loan specialist, Tom Ritter with Axia Home Loans. And before the break, we were talking about the philosophy of how we work with each other. But Tom, you brought a guest today, and you've got just stories. I find people learn really well with stories. So why don't you introduce the guest, and let's just take it from here.
Steve, that's a great introduction here. What I want to do is, you had mentioned a point before the break, and it was advisors, always incorporating advisors. And one of the points...
We can't know it all, can we?
That's right. That's right. So one of the points that I always made was, as I'm counseling a client and educating them on reverse mortgage, I would encourage them to engage with their advisors and ask them questions, and I can answer those questions. The problem was that many of the advisors didn't understand how a reverse mortgage worked. They'd go to their financial advisor, their attorney, their accountant, and they didn't understand it, and all they heard was something negative on the radio or in the news about it, and their advisor would say, don't do it. Well, one of the largest obstacles to or barriers to a reverse mortgage from a financial advisor's perspective is that the financial advisors would always say, hey, my clients do not need a reverse mortgage. They're set. They've got sufficient funds to navigate their retirement. Well, one of the points that I wanted to make was that their clients' parents may need a reverse mortgage. And in that point, it can help the financial advisor serve their client by advising their client's parents. And I want to introduce Michael Oscullion. He is a client and a good friend of mine, and years ago we were introduced because he was helping his mom with a reverse mortgage. Michael?
Good morning. Thank you, Tom. Appreciate it. And Steve, it's great to be here. That was actually good breakfast this morning. Hopefully we can repeat it, right?
Yeah, I'm not so sure you knew you were going to be on the radio, so we really appreciate you for coming on up after breakfast, joining us.
Yeah, I absolutely. I'm glad to be here. As Tom said, first of all, it's been a great friendship, and I thank Tom for all that he's done for me, because I'll tell you, it's interesting. Most people go to Google, right? And I think to your point, Steve, and when they say, I'm going to go and get my own information and do it yourself, and I don't think people realize that Google is not the authority. Google is an aggregator of information. So if there's junk out there, guess what? You're going to get a lot more of it.
You know what's the most expensive advice?
Yeah.
Poor advice.
That's right. Exactly. And
Yeah.
so, well, here with Tom, several years ago, when my dad passed away, and we had my mom, and we had challenges, and that was that, well, we have a business and we have a home, and we wanted to be able to have the money last a very long time. And so Tom came into the picture as a referral, and I'm so glad he did, because there was so much I didn't know of reverse mortgage, and he took the time and educated myself, my mom, and it was really important, and he took his time, and so appreciative of that, and we were able to accomplish. And she's in the home. We've maintained it. We've remodeled it, and it turned out really well.
Yeah. It was a very good story and a great experience for, I think, both you and your mom. And just what it really delivered was this sense of security.
That's right.
It allowed your mom to stay in the home that she wanted to stay in. It was it gave her autonomy as well.
Well, and this morning we were talking about it. You know, you have a lot of people that say that they want to, during retirement years, they want to maintain their lifestyle. And what they don't think about, right, is that they're going to have additional expenses. If they're going to want to do the things that they want to do in retirement, is go on vacations and things like that. They want to be able to do that, and so
that costs money.
It costs
Right.
money, exactly, yeah. and it's definitely if so.
And their income's gone down generally.
That's right. So if you have a burden of a mortgage, and then obviously you don't have enough money to go around. So reverse mortgage worked out really well for us, and like you said, you know, since then I have referred a number of clients over to Tom, and it is really interesting. As most salespeople, right, in general, would think of themselves, Tom actually turned a few of those clients away. He said that reverse mortgage doesn't make sense for him. And it was really interesting because the client said, after I learned what Tom said that was all involved, it was incredible, because a good friend of mine that lives on Mercer Island had sufficient equity in the home, but it really didn't make a whole lot of sense, because it was something that he wanted to leave for his children. So for him, it didn't make sense. But for me, it definitely did.
Yeah. You know, I get that sometimes where an advisor will call me up and they'll say, Steve, these people need a will, but they don't need a trust, or vice versa. And I'm like, well, I'm glad to meet with people, but, you know, and if there's some special knowledge, you know, here's the decision maker. I mean, I love to get a good handoff. But I'm always nervous if someone says, this is exactly what they need. And I'm like, well, I'm the heart specialist. I'm the estate planning attorney trying to decide if they need surgery or not. And so I'm guessing you get that a lot. Someone says, hey, Tom, take care of these clients, but they certainly don't need this, right? You're right?
Oh, Steve, I can think of an example where a client was referred to me from other clients that were very happy with their reverse mortgage. And Sandy called me and said, Tom, I was referred to you by my friends, and I need $45,000 through a reverse mortgage. That's all I need. Don't try to sell me anything else. And I said, great, Sandy, let's talk. Let's get together. Let's have a cup of coffee. I want to really understand what you want to accomplish. Well, it ended up that she had been
and you don't charge for that consultation,
no,
do you? And
no.
I don't either. So it's like, okay, mention your nerves, get over it. Let's talk. Let's sit down. So you got them to come in.
Yeah. So we got together, and okay, Sandy, you want $45,000. What are you going to do with that money? And she said, well, I want to visit my son in Ireland and New York and my grandchildren. I need to repaint the house, finish a window package, and have a little bit of a cushion. Great. Tell me more. Tell me about your expenses, your income. She had lost her husband about a year and a half prior, so she had lost almost half of their Social Security income.
Right.
And at the time, their investments, their 401k, their IRA, had dropped by 40% because the market had just tanked. So she was living on this budget, and she was drawing about $250 to $300 a month from her IRA. So that was kind of bleeding. It wasn't there as a safety net, and she was living $200 to $300 above and beyond her means, so she had to draw that from her IRA.
So they say that growing old is not for the weak-hearted. I mean, it's hard to lose some capacities. It's hard to lose, income. It's hard, and then when the expenses are up, it gets desperate.
It can be very, very difficult.
Yeah.
And I think here's my piece of advice for individuals who are considering a reverse mortgage. Find someone that you trust, that has empathy, but also is very knowledgeable and knows more than just that product. They need to know what you're going through. and they need to know resources that can help from every angle, be it medical, in-home care, estate planning, income.
That's a great point, because when I give seminars, I tell people, you don't know what you don't know. Right? I mean, people often think, I need this, but you want an expert that knows beyond that. They want to see the forest so they can tell them what's their need.
Well, and Steve, to your point, before we actually got a hold of Tom, I did actually. My mom had received a flyer in the mail, and if you recall, Tom, we had gotten that information in the mail, and it was, call us, we will do this, and we called and we had gotten the ball rolling on that. And when Tom stepped into the picture and I showed him what we had already done, he had shown me all of the areas that were gaps, and we had never considered it. So it was definitely a blessing having him review that and coach us and guide us through that.
Yeah. So back to Sandy, though.
Great.
Ultimately, in those discussions, we whittled down what she really needed. We got it down to about $32,000 that allowed her to do those primary
from the initial 45.
Yeah. But on top of that, we really looked at her expenses and how do we make this reverse mortgage a long-term financial strategy. So ultimately, what the reverse mortgage did for her, it allowed her to have that initial cash influx to do certain things that she wanted to do immediately. The reverse mortgage also,
I think that included a trip to see some people.
Two trips, one to Ireland, one to New York.
Oh, great.
It also included a monthly payment to herself for the rest of her life, as long as she lives in the house and pays her taxes and insurance, of $500. So $200 above and beyond her existing budget.
Right, and she was bleeding negative before.
That's right. So at that rate, she didn't have to tap into her IRA anymore. The third aspect of this was she had about $70,000 in a line of credit from the reverse mortgage that was also a safety net. So it doubled her available cash from her IRA. And all of those three attributes just made a very eloquent, full solution for her. And I speak to Sandy twice a year now, and she's just ecstatic. She really is pleased that she's done it, and it's allowed her IRA to grow. She hasn't touched her line of credit, and that actually grows over time as well. She has been able to stash away a little bit of money for gifts and certain spending needs.
Tom, you like that long-term relationship with a client, don't you?
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. It's very important.
Listeners, you should call in today at 1-800-955-8200. That is 1-800-955-8200, because we're talking about estate planning. We're talking about homes. We're talking about, mortgages and reverse mortgages. And we have an expert in the studio with us today to talk about these things. I know you have a few more stories that we're going to talk about in a little bit, but I also wanted to at least introduce the idea of, Michael, you were talking about you were basically dealing with this after your father had died.
Yes.
And you were brought in to kind of salvage the situation.
That's right.
What can you tell us about that?
Well, when Dad passed away of cancer in 2005, it was about 6 years or so that before the funds were really depleting fast. And when you don't think about that and you want to remodel a home and you want to make it yours and such, and that was the case with my mom, and it turned out really nice. And unfortunately, when you don't have that budgeted or you don't think about the other person that is helping with the bills in the home,
right?
Then and you're not responsible with the cash, right? And today we're living longer, right? So when you live longer, you want to spend more,
right? And not always better, because there's aging,
that's right,
and there's care and things like that.
Well, and in my particular case, we had unfortunately a lien from the state that was also imposed on the home. So it was a difficult, complex situation, and that's again, I keep. It sounds like I'm giving a commercial on Tom and his relationship, but it's really important because many people, they get into something and it's their agenda, right? And as Tom said, it's really important that you consider the client. It is, what does my client want, right?
I don't mind giving a commercial for Tom. My own cousin was helping me do a buy and sell and a refi, and I got some just kind of professional courtesy advice from Tom, and he said I had a really good deal. It wasn't about him. I love to refer business to Tom because I think he really cares about the client. He cares about what they need.
Well, and I think I shared that story with you this morning when I said that my dad says to me when I pass on, roll me in a carpet and put me outside for the garbage man to take me.
That's a really good point. We're going to take a break here in a little bit, and after the break, we're going to talk about what is the cost of burying, and oh my gosh, what is the impact on a family really with the things that have to be done? So we're going to talk about that right after our break.
Do you need a will or trust or no planning at all? You're listening to Legacy Planning with Steve Waltar. Join in the conversation at 800-955-8200. That's 800-955-8200. Legacy Planning. You're listening to Legacy Planning with Steve Waltar. Join in the conversation now at 800-955-8200. That's 800-955-8200.
We're back. This is Steve Waltar, and we're talking legacy planning. When I give seminars, I give talks and workshops, I usually ask the question, how many people in this room are never going to die? And I tend to get a few raised hands. We chuckle, and I believe I'm going to live forever, but we do have to pass through death. And sometimes I'll even ask people to kind of close their eyes, be brave, and say, look, I don't want to just hit you with information. I want you to connect. So I have them close their eyes and imagine that they wake up tomorrow. And if you listeners, not if you're driving, but others, you could actually close your eyes. And what if you woke up tomorrow and you woke up in a hospital? And it's a rather bland room. You can't even recognize the workers, but you can feel that there's something in your arm, and you hear that drip, drip, drip. I ask people who would take care of your medical decisions, and who would handle your financial decisions, and then I will ask all of you, what happens if you don't even make it home today? What if you die? Do you know where your documents are? Do you know who's going to handle your legal affairs? Everything from burial to assets. And then I have people open their eyes. And, I want people to connect because it affects your loved ones when you die. And, Michael, before the break, we were talking about your dad.
That's right.
And I'd like to know kind of what happened after he passed.
Well, Dad got sick. It was about January of 2005, and he had been complaining about having back issues. He had just come back from Toronto. My sister lives up there, and so he was back from his trip. We went to see the doctor, and doctor said that unfortunately, this is more than just a back pain. It is a tumor that is in your spine, and we need to do something about this. And so Dad, being as stubborn as he was, he didn't want to. And so once we did actually convince him to do it, we had a stack of medical bills. And you had asked me whether I was the chosen executor, if you will, of his estate.
Okay.
I think it was more by default
than
anything else. And so when he passed away in
And that's a pretty
April,
important thing when I meet with people. Who do you want to handle these things?
It is
That's
so true.
important.
And you really should designate that. So in April, he passed away, and I never, ever could have ever imagined that the expenses of the burial would be about $35,000. And
did you say $35,000?
$35,000.
Yeah.
And local. I mean, he passed away at Evergreen, and we buried him in Bellevue, and that's what it costs. People don't think about it.
What sort of things do they charge for?
Well, it's interesting. You don't know.
I mean, I know these things are expensive.
We're probably gonna get a call from a funeral director, I'm sure of it. But it is interesting. You just don't think about all that's involved, from having obviously the casket, the skirt, the cart, the funeral director, the garden keeper, the person that places the stone, and it's all through their rules. It's
There's
their
subcategories for the skirt.
That's right.
Wow.
And the flowers, and I mean,
Yeah.
the having the body transported from the hospital to the cemetery. It's crazy. You think to yourself, you say, well, and as I did, and my wife and I said, okay, well, this is going to be $5,000 or $7,000 or so, and it's amazing. You get a bill, and how did it come to $35,000?
I'm sorry that was so expensive, and I know you kind of stepped up and took care of things for your family and honored your father. In the future, I'm going to have a guest that does burial and memorial and funeral and cremation. He's going to be one of the guests on this show. And for some of my clients, they want to avoid putting that sort of burden. I don't know if you had to front the money.
I did.
Yeah. See, so there's actually a product. It's called a funeral trust, and I don't charge my clients for doing it. Some of my clients want to make sure that the money is available one business day after they die. Before a death certificate, it would work anywhere in the U.S., and it can be used for burial, memorial, flowers, the speaker, the singer, all that. And if you don't use it all, it can go where is directed in this trust, right? It can go to the children, it can go to the estate if we're doing Medicaid planning, or it can go to the living trust, completely avoid probate.
Wow. So
that's a way to pre-fund it and actually get a discount because, they hold the money.
I wish I would have known.
Is there more you want to tell us about what happened there?
Well, and the one aspect of burial that you don't think about also is that the family. And I know this sounds strange when I say it like that, but you don't. In my case, I've been blessed with having a loving and large family. Mm-hmm. And what you don't think about is you consider, as I did, well, my mom and my sisters. Well, there's the extended family. There is my uncle, his brother, sisters, and you have my mom's brothers and sisters. So as I initially thought this, when Dad got sick and it looked like, he was going to pass on, was, okay, well, I thought of my mom and my sisters and immediate family. You don't think about all the others that you need to have a discussion with and making sure that that they're satisfied with your planning as well.
Yeah. Death. The word cancer, and I think Tom's got a story on cancer, it affects families.
It does.
Both of my wife's parents died of cancer. Both of my parents have had cancer. They're doing well. And then when there's a death, I mean, people process it differently. And if there's money or fighting, what a mess that is.
That's right.
Want to give out the number again here, which is 800-955-8200. That is 800-955-8200. And I'm also going to give out the radio at waltar.com. Okay, radio at WALTAR.com. That's a way to get a question to us today, but even better, that gets you to my firm, and we give free initial consults, and we're able to follow up with you later and talk about things. So I think, Tom, that you had a story about cancer and how you help meet some clients' needs.
Yeah, Steve, one of the points that is important to recognize is that discussion of your death has to take place. And it's very important to have that frank discussion with your parents and to really understand what the wishes are, what the plan is. So it can alleviate a lot of stress. It can alleviate a lot of tension between family members. I recall a couple that came to me about 6 years ago, and it was Ron and Gloria, and they had been looking for a reverse mortgage. And the primary reason was that Ron wanted to make sure that his wife had an income after he passed. And because their investments had taken a huge dive at that point in time, and she was really going to be struggling taking care of her financial needs. And a reverse mortgage was a really good fit. So that initial meeting was ultimately the same initial meeting, understanding what their goals and objectives are and what's important to them. So we got to that point, and Ron says, Tom, I've decided I want to do business with you. I said, great, Ron. And he said, I'll call you in about 6 weeks. and I knew that he was diagnosed with cancer, and it was somewhat in remission. I said, Ron, how do you feel today? He says, I feel great. I said, good. Let's get this done now.
Absolutely.
Because you don't want to do it when you're stressed out or when you're sick. You got to address it while you're feeling good. So he said, okay. So we got the process started, and he started, went through counseling. We did the appraisal. Usually it takes about 45 to 60 days, somewhere in that range, to get this thing done. It's really up to the pace of the client. We were in this about 2 weeks, and Ron calls me and says, Tom, I don't think I'm going to make it.
Wow.
And he felt, hey, I'm very, very close. We had the appraisal already. We contacted title and escrow underwriters, got the whole team together, and within a week, he signed the final documents.
Wow.
That's incredible.
And then 3 days later is when the loan funds.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so
Right.
there's a right
Yeah.
of rescission
Right.
period. So we were able to accelerate it for Ron and Gloria. And the day that it funded, I picked up the phone to call Ron, and his son answers the phone.
Uh-oh.
And he says, Tom, Ron just passed away about a half hour ago. I was calling Ron to congratulate him.
Right.
The transaction was done. He knew it was going to be done that day.
Right. He had that peace of mind.
Yeah, he was holding on until this happened, until it took place for his wife. And I speak to Gloria
That
all
is
the time.
great.
So.
That is great. I believe we've got a caller. Caroline from Black Diamond? Did you want to? Yeah, go ahead. I guess we... All right. I think what we're going to do is we're going to take our last break of the day here. And if you want to talk about mortgages, if you want to talk about reverse mortgages, death, dying, and insurance, it is all on the table. So if you haven't done planning, you got a question, after the break, we're going to talk about those things.
Legacy Planning. You're listening to Legacy Planning with Steve Waltar. Is there ever a good time to do estate planning? Ask your kids. They'll know that right now would be the perfect time. Call in for the right answers at 800-955-8200. That's 800-955-8200. Legacy Planning. This is Legacy Planning with Steve Waltar, committed to helping you with personalized and compassionate estate planning. The lines reopen for your call at 800-955-8200. That's 800-955-8200.
All right, we're back, and I understand we had a little trouble with the call board or something like that. So, Carolyn, if you want to call back, we'll be sure to take your call. I do want to give out Tom's number. If you want to reach Tom, of course, call my law office. That's 425-455-6788. That is 425-455-6788. But Tom can be reached at 206-310-7707. That is 206-310-7707. So, Tom, what other stories do you have, to talk about helping people?
Yeah, as you're retiring, as you're looking at a reverse mortgage, there's an interesting a couple that I've helped years ago, and they owned a beautiful place in Seattle and got a reverse mortgage to eliminate their mortgage payment. They had plenty of equity in the home, and they were there at the house for 3 years.
Hey, Tom, we're going to try one more time. Nope. Okay. They were there 3 years.
3 years. They ended up wanting to move down to San Diego. So they had a reverse mortgage. They sold their home.
Don't we all want to move to San Diego?
Well, they were fortunate enough to do so.
Okay.
And they moved to San Diego to be with their grandchildren for a few years. They ended up buying a house with a reverse mortgage in San Diego. And just about 3 months ago, they sold that house and they moved back up to Seattle. And they're buying another house with a reverse mortgage. So
All right, we're going to take, because I think patiently someone's called 3 times. Caroline, are you on the phone?
Hello?
Yes, you're on the radio. Please go ahead.
Oh, I am. Okay. My son is renting a house. They've been in it for just over a year, and the landlord says that he's responsible for the water sprinkler that went out and the refrigerator that quit working and the dishwasher that quit working. Is this true or what?
Wow, that's an interesting question. So he's renting, but now the landlord's saying that he's on the hook for all these costs.
Yeah, he had to pay the $400 water bill because the sprinkler leaked underground and nobody knew it.
Well, I can't fully answer the question without looking at the actual lease, but let me let Tom give a stab at it, and then I'll come back and talk about that as well.
Good, thanks.
Great. I'd have to defer it back to legal. It's really under that contract as to what he is liable for and responsible for. So to answer that question directly, we need more information. And I suggest that he call Steve.
You know, the other thing is that frequently if they pay costs, it may reduce the rent. So it's hard to know if that cost would be over in addition to the monthly rent. But yeah, there ought to be a written contract. Otherwise, we'd have to default to the law of real estate contract law. Is this at all helpful for you, or how else can we?
No, not really. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know whether when I used to rent my house, if something went wrong with it, they could either take it off the rent or I would have to pay it to make the house livable again.
Yeah, that's my understanding. And my daughter's renting in the university district, and the dishwasher didn't work, and I was explaining, well, that's the landlord's job. And, if they're not responsive at some point, you can pay and then deduct it from the rent. But the most important thing is, what does the lease say? What is the contract? So I would say find that contract, and then you could send it to my firm. Where does your son live?
Skycomish. And how much do you charge for that?
I think for Skycomish, I would probably refer him to one of the other people that does a lot of contract law, because I don't do an awful lot of contract law. I move homes in and out of trust. Maybe we should talk about that, but I'm not a real estate attorney per se. So
isn't there a general attorney or somebody that sticks up for renters?
Well, again, I know people that do real estate law, so by all means, call my office at 425-455-6788, and we'll be happy to take that information. And I know a bunch of attorneys that do real estate law, and they can answer all of that for you.
Yeah, but they all charge.
Well, I can't solve this for free over the radio. I mean, I haven't seen the contract. Some attorney needs to know that, and I would refer you to someone that they would tell you what it would cost, and they would point you in the right direction.
I just thought there was a general somebody or other that's over all that stuff that you can call tenants. There's so many laws out there and people of the state that just answer. Okay.
Yeah, I sense the frustration. That's a good mom looking out for her son, wanting someone not to take advantage of them. But in deals like that, you got to look at the actual contract.
Okay, it's the contract is the crux of it all.
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you much.
Thank
Bye.
you for the call. So, Tom, did you get to finish the story? They closed on the house. Bring us back up to speed on that.
So most people don't know that you can buy a home with a reverse mortgage. And this particular client that I'm working with has a record. They're on their 3rd reverse mortgage. They love the product so much, it worked for them so well that they are purchasing their next home with a reverse mortgage.
Let me just be perfectly clear. You're able to help people that want reverse mortgages when it fits, but that's not all that you provide for people, correct?
That's right. My focus now, my primary focus in business is working with other professionals to help clients buy homes, refinance, and in many cases reverse mortgage. But I work with very, very good real estate agents that are effective in today's very difficult real estate market. And I've always found it very beneficial for my clients to surround myself with experts, and experts like you, Steve, that know their craft. And
how important is it to have good experts around you?
It's vital.
I wanted to share with you a story on that. So a few years back, about 15 years ago, there's a couple, and one, the wife was deaf mute and two sons, and lived out in Woodinville. And unfortunately, when the conversation of life insurance came up, and the husband said, "I'm taken care of, thank you very much," and unfortunately, when he passed away, the life insurance policy didn't cover it because he passed, and they said that it was not a accidental death, that's what the cause of death was, and unfortunately they hadn't planned anything. So now here is a mom that has to take care of the home and such. It's important to plan.
Boy, that's important. Actually, this week, I actually had someone that came in because their mom passed, and we needed to do a probate, but we learned that the title was still in the dad's name. He died before, so we had to do a double probate. Wow. I actually filed 4 probates this week.
Wow.
And on the topic of planners, I had someone who'd been to a seminar, they heard about Safe Harbor Trust, et cetera, and they fired that other firm, and they came to me because they felt they were not really being served well. So at our firm, and as well as Tom, what we're all about is finding out what is exactly the need of the individual. If they're there for their parents, well, guess what? We need to talk to the parents, right? We need to make sure that we're planning for the right people. In the future, we're going to have accountants on this. We're also going to have a funeral director come on and talk with us. So thank you for being here. You've been listening to Legacy Planning. Have a great week.
You've been listening to Legacy Planning with local attorney Steve Waltar. If you have questions about what you heard on today's show or estate planning in general, be sure to call Steve's office in Bellevue to schedule your free no-obligation consultation. Call Steve at 425-455-6788. That's 425-455-6788. And remember, you can always listen to today's or previous programs by going to waltar.com. That's WALTAR.com. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend. And be sure to join us again next Saturday morning from 8 till 9, right here on 820 AM KGNW.